Good afternoon, and thank you for having me here again. Today, SDAR is launching what we are calling our Regional Spotlight Series, and I'm telling you, I am so excited about this. The Spotlight Series is where we'll be talking about different things with local EDCs, our SANDAG, and other things that spotlights different projects and programs and policies that are shaping our region throughout San Diego County. The goal of this spotlight is to ensure our members that they are in the know about what is taking place in the communities and the places that they live and they do business. So we want to be sure that we're giving you that opportunity and a voice to have during the process. With us today, we have one of our most respected and knowledgeable voices when it comes to San Diego region's economy and its transportation needs, Ray Major, who is the Chief Data and Analytics and Chief Economist for the San Diego Association of Governments, better known as SANDAG. I had to catch myself back on that one. You guys know I go start talking too fast. Ray is responsible for the agency's data modeling as well as the transportation network modeling. And so with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Ray. He's got a wealth of knowledge available for you, and you'll see what I'm talking about, that Spotlight Series. You can't beat it.
Thank you very much, Carla. And I will share my screen now and go over the update to the region's economy. I would like to give you a quick update on what's happening in the San Diego region, especially as it relates to demographics, jobs, housing, and to give you a kind of introduction to the SANDAG Regional Transportation Plan and how it may impact real estate in the future here in the region. The first section I'd like to cover is about the demographics of the region. And the San Diego region really has a very diverse population. We have 3.4 million people in the region. We are the fifth most populous county in the nation. That number is expected to grow to about 3.7 million by the year 2050. We also have a younger population than most of the other region. In San Diego, our regional median age is lower than the US, and that's actually really important because right now biotech and high tech really drive a large part of our economy, and the workforce that people draw from, or these businesses draw from, come from this demographic. We're also richer than most of the other nation, and we are better educated than the rest of the nation. When we take a look at population density in the San Diego area, what you see on this map is where the densest areas are. And you know that most of our county is built up in the western 1/3 of the region, with the remaining 2/3 being almost open space. The reason I bring this up, because this becomes very important when you take a look at the plans that are being put in place right now for the future of San Diego in terms of where population will be growing in the future too. So there are a lot of land use decisions that are going to impact this. But if you kind of get a feeling of this map, you'll see that what's going to happen is that the vast majority of the growth is going to continue to happen in these areas and not in the unincorporated East County area. And so what's going to happen really is that 300,000 people who are coming to the San Diego region will all be densified in the existing area that's already developed. This map shows the expected population growth by 2050. The darker yellow areas show you where the densification is going to occur. You see a lot of it happening in the downtown area, the area around Mission Valley. Kearny Mesa will have a lot of new units that have been, land use has been allocated for housing units there, and some growth along the 78 corridor, along down with the Chula Vista area. The region, though, is going to start to age. This population pyramid shows what our population looked like in 2010. We have males on the left-hand side, females on the right-hand side, and you see by 5-year age category from the bottom up the number of people in each one of those age categories. You see that the 20 to 24-year-old bar is the longest on males, and that's because we have a large military population here, and that's what's represented by that long bar. But look what happens by 2050. By 2050, you see that this population pyramid has changed, and there are a lot more people who are in the 65 plus category. So I'll go back really quickly and so that you can see what happens. The people who are the baby boomers essentially age into senior citizens. And this has a lot of impact on the housing market because people who are in the 65 plus category are going to demand a different type of housing than is currently being demanded by the younger population here in San Diego. When we take a look at the population a different way, this shows the 2016 and 2050 population, we see that 85% of the total growth is going to happen in age 65 plus, which is this category over here and above. And so again, the people here are going to probably be more active in 2050 than seniors are right now, but their needs are going to be different also because they're not going to be working. So they're going to be looking for places that have recreational facilities. They're going to need to be located more closely to hospitals, for instance, or healthcare facilities, along with wanting to have some type of public transportation that they could use rather than having to drive their own vehicle. So that's kind of how our region is changing in the next 20 years in terms of population or demographics. When we take a look at housing, you see that the housing growth is really concentrated in several areas too in the region. And again, the darker areas here represent what we believe is going to happen by 2050. And all of these population centers are based upon the jurisdiction's current land use strategies, along with strategies that are being proposed but are not yet on the books. So you'll hear a lot about RENA and the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. Those numbers are worked into this. But what this really shows you is where you should expect growth in the future. This graph shows housing affordability in the San Diego region. And you know that real estate has been doing really well in the last year or so, especially during this COVID lockdown, which is really very interesting. But let's talk a little bit about affordability. If you take a look at this graph, what the graph shows is that before the Great Recession, about 10% of San Diegans could qualify for the home that they were living in. So in terms of affordability. When we went into the Great Recession, housing prices came down and interest rates also came down and housing affordability went up. But what you ended up doing is creating an entire business of house flipping. And this is when house flippers were purchasing houses and turning them over. And so it really didn't increase home ownership during this period. What ended up happening is that that a lot of the people who did the house flipping are the ones who profited from the reduction in prices. And what you see now is that we're at about 27% affordability, but housing prices are higher than they've ever been. So the difference between housing affordability now and when it was 10% is that interest rates are so incredibly low right now that it makes borrowing money almost free. And you see a lot of people out there trying to purchase homes. The average income in the San Diego region is about $62,000. So if you have a family that has a single earner who's earning the average income in San Diego, they can afford a unit that's worth about $310,000. And as you know, there aren't very many of these in the area. If you have dual income of $62,000, you can afford a unit that's around $620,000. It takes a dual income of around $67,000 to afford what would be a median priced home of about $730,000. And so what this really is saying is that even though affordability is relatively good right now because interest rates are low, there's a large percentage of the population who cannot afford to move into homes. Part of our problem here in San Diego is that we have a lack of housing. And my estimate is that there's about 100,000 units of backlog that need to be built in order to accommodate pent-up demand. This graph shows the number of residential units that were permitted from 1970 forward. And for those of you who've been around a while, you remember when we built out Rancho Penasquitos and Mira Mesa, Carmel Valley, for instance, and we would put up 20, 30, 40,000 units per year would be built, like in the decade of the 80s. And what would end up happening is we'd have this huge amount of extra units that needed to be sold off. And then as the economy slowed down, those units were eventually absorbed into the economy. But something very different has happened if you take a look since the Great Recession. So from about 2006 on, what's happened is that the land use patterns have significantly changed. So where we were able to do greenfield development here in the region in the 70s and 80s and a little bit into the 2000s, where you would be able to put up housing tracts with 5,000 units, we can't do that anymore. And now growth has to be accommodated by infill, and that's much more expensive and much more difficult to find land to do that. And you also have a lot of public opposition when you're trying to build units in neighborhoods that are already existing. And so what has happened is that we've created a deficit of housing. There's about 12,000 housing units that need to be built per year. We've been short of that from the Great Recession on. We've been building about 7,600 units on average per year. So that's a 63,000 unit shortage. If you take into account vacation rentals and you take into account second homes that are not occupied, we have about 100,000 unit shortage here in the San Diego region. This graph shows what's happened to housing prices versus existing home sales. And as you all know, in the last couple of quarters, housing prices have gone up, but we've also seen a tremendous number of people purchasing new houses. A lot of this has to do with interest rates. In terms of the regional plan that San Diego is putting together, I'd like to spend just a few minutes talking about what's going to happen. In March of this year, the San Diego Association of Governments Board of Directors are going to be presented a plan, which is the new regional plan that will be driving what our region looks like for the next 40 years. And with that, they will be asked to adopt this plan. And by October of this year, if this plan is adopted, then this is the direction that the region will be going in terms of transportation. And I'd like to talk a little bit about how it impacts real estate. But really, there were three challenges that we were trying to solve with this particular plan. Congestion, we needed to balance with social equity, and we need to abide by many state and federal mandates, especially as they relate to greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled. The plan is based on 5 big moves or 5 strategies, and I'm going to go through each one of these just really briefly and to try to tie that to the real estate market. The first one is complete corridors, and complete corridors talks about connecting all of the different major infrastructure freeways in San Diego, but also having things sorted out a little bit better so that using technology, we can, you don't have an ambulance following a motorcycle that's following a truck on the freeway, for instance. We can start to use technology to have connected vehicles and such. And this also includes having a network of bike paths and active transportation paths, and just being able to have different ways of getting around the region. The Transit Leap talks about the build out of not only transit, like the trolley that you see going up to UCSD that we're just opening, but also high-speed rail that would be either underground or above ground, depending upon where it needs to be. It would include high-speed transit buses, and it would include dedicated lanes on the freeway to help people move around. Again, this is in response to vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions and reducing those. The third concept is flexible fleets, which really talks about having areas that you can get around in these shared vehicles, and where you wouldn't need your own car, but what you would be able to do is to get into a pod, for instance. You'd use an app on your phone, and you would be able to take that vehicle wherever you wanted to, and it would drop you off. So it would be kind of like an Uber on demand, and it might be driverless, or in some cases it might have a driver. And finally, the next operating system, a lot of focus is on how we take technology to really improve the existing infrastructure. Mobility hubs is a concept that is worked into this plan. And what this talks about is densification of land use. So as a real estate professional, you may be interested in following where these are being proposed and what's being done to enhance them, because this is where the investment from government is going to go. It's going to be going into densifying areas within different jurisdictions that will allow for kind of a live, work, play environment that is linked to mass transit. You can think about some of the places back east, like Washington, D.C., for instance, it has a transit system that would be more similar to one that looks like this. And so mobility hubs is significant. If these take hold, and this is the direction we're going, this will significantly impact the value of real estate, especially around these hubs, because these hubs are going to become very important to people being able to get to different places within the region. And these are the mobility hubs that have been proposed. And so there are 4 or 5 different concepts or types of mobility hubs that are being proposed. They would also be facilitated with these flexible fleets where when you got off the public transportation, for instance, you would have a flexible fleet that you could take, this automated, autonomous, shared electric vehicle that would take you the last mile either to your home or to your work. And so these are kind of where those are being proposed. I just want to leave this map here for a second so you can take a look at it, depending upon what area you work as a real estate agent. These are going to be of interest to you in the next decades to come, because this is how we're going to meet the state and federal mandates based upon what they're requiring to battle climate change. So there are different types of mobility hubs. Sorry, didn't you do that one? Okay. And we also have a proposed central mobility hub. The central mobility hub that you may have heard about would be at the existing Spaywar building, where that would be built out. All of the infrastructure in the region would come there. There would be some type of underground tunnel, hopefully to the airport. If not, we'll go around the edge of the runway, depending upon FAA. And what you'll see here is that you have high-speed rail that would be coming into the mobility hub. There's a proposal for the cars and buses to be able to get there also. And then you'll see local buses, light trolley, and even pedestrian and bike paths all being connected to this central mobility hub. So this may be one of the largest developments that happens in San Diego. There should be, when it's built out, over 5,500 units here. Much of it's going to be market rate, but there's going to be a lot of low income housing also that's proposed for over here. And that is really going to spur the redevelopment of the entire area here in the sports arena. And this just shows the underground tunnel to the airport. This is the site that is right now proposed for this central mobility hub. And when it's finished, it's going to look something like this, where it's like a Grand Central Station concept for San Diego. There's also going to be one by the Mexican border, and also up in the Sereno Valley area, which is our largest employment center. So the trolley or the high-speed rail will already go there. You have your freeways, and we have the existing trolley and all of the other infrastructure that will be put in. And that's really to support this area with the goal of taking some of the traffic off of 5 and 805 and switching it to alternative forms of transportation. So those are the 5 big moves, and part of the transportation plan that's going to be happening in the future. And with that, I would like to hand it back over to Carla.
Well, I'll tell you, Ray, that was a lot in a little bit of time. And I mean, great information. That's some of the stuff that I really like about when we do these series, to show the value to our membership and what we can bring. This is amazing. What could you say in relation to the 5 big moves? What is the next kind of timeline, steps, things that happen, just what's happening next anyway?
So the first thing is the adoption of the plan. That's going to happen this year by October. And once that plan is adopted, we will immediately start to work on designing this particular system and prioritizing it. And so we already have work that's going on down at the border. We're putting in a 3rd border crossing, and that's been in the works for about 10 years. You see the improvements we've made on the existing trolley. You could expect to have a purple line, which is another trolley type line going from the border up into the Kearny Mesa area, into those job centers to get the workforce up here. And then you're going to see improvements happen over the next couple of years. But this is a huge change from the previous transportation plan. For the last 20 years, the transportation plan was pretty stagnant. It was just we were basically just updating it every 4 years. But this one really is a complete transformation of the transportation plan.
Wow. I guess we're implementing a lot of that technology we were talking about, right?
We are.
Now you touched on, and I'll say real quickly here, you touched on the bluffs and things like that. But in respects to Del Mar, are there any plans for supporting or relocating the rail lines along that coastal bluff area?
The Del Mar bluffs are one of our highest priorities right now, and we are working on bluff stabilization, and we've been doing that now for the last year. We're getting state grants to do that, but the ultimate solution for the bluffs has to be to move that rail line inward. And so we have different plans right now in place that we're doing feasibility on to move that line inward and also underground in some areas. We also need to kind of straighten out the S-curve that goes through the Sorrento Valley area. And there's double tracking that we need to do in that area to really improve the goods movement through the San Diego region. So those are all part of the regional plan.
Right. Initially, I had some other questions on housing itself, but I'll tell you, your presentation was so complete that you actually answered them. But I'll have to ask this one. Do you expect any kind of disproportionately the number between condos and, let's say, your apartment complexes and even single family?
So what I think is going to happen is that developers will primarily build multifamily units, because right now the only way that you can really do it is with infill. So that would be tearing down an existing single family residential unit and building multiple units. Many of the jurisdictions have become much more lenient when it comes to second dwelling units, for instance, putting granny flats on, or even doing garage conversions and making those legal units. So those are some of the ways that they're trying to reduce the demand on housing. But in terms of the mix, by leaps and bounds, it will be condos, it will be attached housing.
Right. We could kind of see that coming, but yeah, at least they get to hear it from the expert, right?
And you also need to remember that as the population ages, there are a lot of people right now who have, their kids have moved out and they're still living in a 4-bedroom house and they're starting to age. And a lot of those people, if they had the opportunity, would probably, and some of this has to do with Prop 13, but that's a whole different conversation. A lot of those people would move to a smaller unit that was easier to take care of. It was more centrally located, where there were amenities, et cetera. So housing demand is going to change significantly in terms of what people are requiring in the future here in San Diego.
Right on the money. I can't say it even better. I actually had questions about the seniors, but I'll have to say again, you beat me to the punch. You actually talked about the demographics and the higher population areas where we would see that. So I can say nothing but a big thank you today just for joining us and providing that information. It's just a huge value, especially to anybody working in this industry related to real estate transportation. Thank you, Ray, very, very much.
Well, you're very welcome, and have a great 2021, everybody.
Need more help? Contact SDAR Member Services at 858-715-8040 or membership@sdar.com.